Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration will come to order. We do have a quorum present. Representative O'Neill, did you have a chance to review the minutes of February 9th?
I did, Madam Chair. I would move the minutes.
Representative O'Neill moves the minutes of February 9th, 2017. Any discussion, changes, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. Next, I move Senate Concurrent Resolution 4, the resolution adopting deadlines for the 2017 session. Any discussion or amendments? Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have, I think, 3 or maybe 4 amendments.
Okay.
I don't know if you care which order we take them in. I would offer the PMRES-A05.
For that amendment, Representative Hortman. Representative Hortman moves the A05 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, we have seen at the end of the legislative session in 2011, 2012, 2015, and 2016, a real train wreck of, you know, the revisers kind of working around the clock, and in the last 4 or 5 days of the session, members not having copies of bills, conference committees not meeting, a lot of things being decided at the very top of the leadership structure. And I think it's time to look at the last 6 years and say that it's time to make some changes in the process so that we can avoid the train wreck. The train wreck's not only embarrassing to the legislative institutions that we're a part of, but it's, I think, embarrassing for the citizens of Minnesota who have a right to expect that we will adopt a budget in a timely manner. Part of the problem of why we don't adopt a budget in a timely manner is we don't get the forecast until late February, which essentially is March 1st. Another problem with not getting the work done, you know, having $43 billion budget to decide in 60 days is sometimes we have leaders who believe that they should make the vast majority of the decisions, and that conference committees should get very detailed instructions about how to put bills together. But we, in the past, and we've served, Madam Chair, together during a time when this process worked better, when Speaker Swigum was in charge of the House, I believe Dean Johnson was in charge of the Senate. And what happened was the leaders at the top would decide the joint targets and give those targets to the conference committee chairs, so that all 201 members of the legislature were doing the work of closing up the session during the final 2 weeks, and rather than just 3 individuals meeting behind closed doors to make all those decisions. And I think part of the problem is we only have one deadline, which is the date of adjournment. We don't have an interim deadline that people have to meet. And you look at all other aspects of life, and people have a series of interim deadlines when there's a big project to get things done. So I think our past performance has indicated we are in dire need of an interim deadline, and that deadline would be a date by which the House and Senate, and probably the governor, would agree on joint targets, and then those joint targets would be given to the conference committee chairs. And the proposed changes I would make to the joint rules, which I propose we send over to our friends in the Senate on the concurrent resolution relating to the deadlines, would put those deadlines 2 weeks before the end of session. And Madam Chair, I'd like a roll call.
A roll call being requested. There will be a roll call. Is there any discussion to the amendment? And if not, I would just like to say that, I mean, I think you have a very interesting point, and we are still in discussion with the Senate over potential joint targets. And I don't believe that the joint targets, if we are to have one, should be in the same resolution as the deadline. So it would be possible, potentially, if the Senate would be open to it, to discuss a joint target deadline. But members, I would ask you to vote against it. As far as putting it into this concurrent resolution today, we should get on with our work and get the first 3 deadlines out of the way. I will continue to work with the Senate on whether or not we can have a fourth target or joint target. But I just feel that that should be in a different resolution if we were to go that route than the deadline resolution that we're putting forward today. Having said that, is there any other discussion? Okay, the clerk will take the roll.
Peppin?
No.
Albright?
No.
Applebaum?
Yes.
Baker? Fenton?
No.
Flanagan. Freiberg.
Yes.
Gunther.
No.
Portman.
Aye.
Keel.
No.
Lesh.
Aye.
Murphy.
Yes.
Nash.
No.
O'Driscoll.
No.
O'Neill.
No.
Palowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
No.
Smith.
No.
Swedinsky.
No.
There being 6 ayes and 11 nays, the amendment does not prevail. Representative Hortman?
I'd like to offer the PMRES-A08 amendment.
Representative Portman moves the A08 amendment to the amendment. Representative Portman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this proposed amendment to the joint rules, which we could send over to our friends in the Senate on this Senate concurrent resolution, would provide that conference committees shall provide public notice when an agreement is reached on a conference committee report, and that the conference committee report would be signed in public. Members, as I discussed with regard to the previous amendment, part of the problem when we have the train wrecks at the end of session is just a few people in rooms, some of us don't even know which rooms where, or which people, cooking up the final agreement on a conference committee report. And that is just really work that should be done in the public as much as possible, and at least the agreement that there is a conference committee report agreement, and the fact of its signing should be publicly noticed and should happen in public. And I would like a roll call on that one as well.
A roll call having been requested, there will be a roll call. Any discussion, members? I would just say that I had the opportunity to meet with the President and the Majority Leader of the Senate, and they are not interested in changing the joint rules in any way. And as you know, this would require a change in the joint rules. And for that reason, I think that we should vote against this today, because otherwise we're not going to be able to get our work done and have permanent rules and permanent deadlines. So I would ask for a no vote, members.
And Madam Chair,
Representative Portman.
I would just respond that, transparency is really one of our most important jobs here. I think if Americans and Minnesotans are supposed to believe in their government, they need to see what we're doing. And I think this amendment is very straightforward. It's about doing the public's work in the public. And so I would strongly encourage members to vote in favor of transparency.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Peppin.
No.
Albright.
No.
Applebaum.
Yes.
Baker. Fenton.
No.
Flanagan. Freiberg.
Yes.
Gunther.
No.
Portman.
Aye.
Keel.
No.
Lesh.
Aye.
Murphy.
Yes.
Nash.
No.
O'Driscoll.
No.
O'Neill.
No.
Palowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
No.
Smith.
No.
Swedinsky.
No.
There being 6 ayes and 11 nays, the A08 amendment does not prevail. Representative Hortman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to offer the PMRES-809, A09 amendment.
Representative Hortman moves the A09 amendment to your amendment, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, again, this one relates to transparency. Right now, we do not have much time to review conference committee reports at the end of session. Not only do we not have time, but the public does not have time. And as a result, we've seen substantial errors in conference committee reports. Sometimes things get inserted that haven't been heard in the House or Senate, and people don't have a full opportunity to provide testimony about the implications. And so what the A09 amendment would do would would require that a final version of the conference committee report would be posted 12 hours prior to the time we take it up in conference committee to approve it, and that those 12 hours don't include the hours of midnight to 7 a.m. the more we do our work during the time when the public has an opportunity to observe what we're doing, the better off we're likely to be in terms of producing a product that doesn't have mistakes and unintended consequences. Because as former Senate Majority Leader Bach is fond of saying, when we pass bills, we pass those bills into law. We own the unintended consequences as well as the intended consequences. And I think we do a disservice to ourselves and to Minnesotans when we don't know clearly the implications of what are in bills. And part of that happens by rushing the whole process at the end. And I would like a roll call on this.
A roll call having been requested, there will be a roll call. I would just ask members to vote against this amendment for the same reason. It affects the joint rules, and the Senate has informed us they are not planning on changing the joint rules. So for us to be able to get our work done, we need to move forward with the deadlines. I'd also say this would make, I think that this would bring some inconsistencies, some unintended consequences, because it wouldn't line up with some of our other rules. We haven't made that provision for anything else, so I think that would be a little bit of an inconsistency. So with that, I would ask for a no. Is there any other additional discussion?
Just in closing.
Representative Fortman.
Madam Chair, we can be the younger, more fun, more hip, and more transparent body.
Representative Portman, we already
by
are.
encouraging the Senate to adopt these.
Representative Murphy.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, thank you. You know, the Senate is a separate body, of course, and we do share joint rules, but we have the opportunity to express how we want to lead here in the House of Representatives. And, you know, I have heard since I have been elected at the end of every session how members of the House feel like they're being rolled by the Senate. And here's a shot, here's a chance for us to show the Senate the better way to lead and govern and be more transparent for the people of Minnesota. And so I think it would be wise for us, really, to put this to the question for the Senate rather than accede to their point at this point so early. We shouldn't give in to them this quickly.
Representative Murphy, I'm not sure I agree with your assessment on who's getting rolled at the end of session, but anyway, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Peppin.
No.
Albright.
No.
Applebaum.
Yes.
Baker. Fenton.
No.
Flanagan. Freiberg.
Yes.
Gunther.
No.
Portman.
Aye.
Keel.
No.
Lesh.
Aye.
Murphy.
Yes.
Nash. O'Driscoll.
No.
O'Neill.
No.
Kulowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
No.
Smith.
No.
Swedinsky.
No.
There being 6 ayes and 11 nays, the A09 amendment does not prevail. Representative Hortman, are there any other amendments?
I don't think to the concurrent resolution.
Okay, with that, I will renew my motion. I will remove my motion that Senate Current Resolution 4, the resolution adopting deadlines for the 2017 session, be approved. Is there any additional discussion to the amendment, or to the resolution?
I have a question.
Representative Portman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have you discussed with the Senate the date by which budget bills will be in conference? So maybe not a formal deadline, but a target date that you and the Senate have agreed to try to get bills, the major budget bills, into conference by?
Thank you, Representative Portman. We have had some discussions, but no final outcome of those discussions yet. We will continue to talk, however.
And just to follow up to that, have you had any discussions about dates by which you intend to give the conference committees targets?
With the Senate, Representative Portman?
Right.
We may have had some discussions, but no outcomes from those discussions yet.
And this is not in
Representative
the
Portman.
nature of a partisan point. I just think, you and I have both been here for 12 years, and we know that things can work poorly at the end of session. And I would just strongly encourage you, in addition to having these first, second, and third deadlines, that as soon as possible, you would adopt an agreement between the House and the Senate and the governor, if you feel you need to include him, and that you make it public of the date by which you intend to put bills into the conference committees, and the date by which you intend to give them targets, and the date by which you intend for them to complete their work, if we expect a timely finish to the session.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion to Resolution 4? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion does prevail. And the resolution is adopted. Okay, we will now move on to the permanent rules of the House, and I've asked Mr. McCormick to walk us through the rules changes. That should be the bigger packet.
Madam Chair, members, we're working off the document entitled H Perm Rules 2017D. This contains the entire rules of the House of Representatives, which will be acted on the floor. There are 4 changes from the rules that were in place in 2015 and 2016. The first change is on page 3. It's a change in Rule 1.15. A new paragraph C at the bottom of page 3 carrying on to page 4 has been written. That change states that except after the last Thursday in which the legislature can meet in regular session in the odd or even year, or after a date determined by this committee, a motion that the House concur in Senate amendments to a House file is not in order until 12 hours after the Speaker announces that a message from the Senate has been received requesting concurrence by the House to amendments adopted by the Senate in a House file. So under this new rule, as I read it, if the intent was to not concur and send a bill to conference committee, that could go right away. But if the intent is to concur, a motion to concur is not in order until 12 hours after the Speaker has announced that that message has been received. The second change is on page 13 of the rules. This is simply an update over what we did in the temporary rules on the first day of session. On the temporary rules on the first day of session, we applied the pre-filing deadline to adoption of these rules or adoption of joint rules. And this does the exact same thing with just a little bit cleaner language. The third and fourth changes, the third change is on page 14 and 15 and is simply the update of the names of the omnibus bills on Rule 4.03 to conform with the new names. And the last change is on page 21, and it is simply the addition of our new committee names to conform with those. Those are the 4 changes that are in the document in front of you.
Thank you. And members, I would just add just a couple things to that. The change to Rule 115, I think that's compromise language we worked on with Representative Hortman and our staff, and it aligns the time frame for voting on House files amended by the Senate to be the same as conference committee reports. So we brought some consistency and transparency there. And then the Rule 3.33 just clarifies that we should be doing the same thing with the rules that we are with the other bills on the floor. I will move the permanent rules. Rules 217D, and I believe there are some amendments. Senator Portman, do you have amendments that you want to move, or
I do.
others?
We all do. Do you
Okay.
have the copies that have people's names on them?
Yes. Okay, did you want me to go in order, or you don't care?
Whichever order you would like to go in.
Representative Pulowski, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the A06. The A06 amendment, probably the pertinent section is 1.7 to 1.9, where each annual session after the final day in April, no bill will be introduced on the House floor unless approved for introduction by a vote of 2/3 of the body. First of all, Madam Chair, I appreciate the meeting that we had before session at some length. It was enjoyable. As you know, we've done a lot of work looking at the rules, and we have had problems with this body finishing its work, but even more importantly, doing its work well. We're already at 1,188 bills as of today. That's 8.8 per member, or about 9. And we apparently are on a pace to perhaps even exceed the 4,000 bills that we introduced last session. At some point, there has to be a stop. We are a part-time legislature. And I have said it before, and I'm going to say it again. You can't put infinite numbers of resources into a finite system and expect anything other than what we've had the last few years. And the last few years, we've had a breakdown. The other way to look at this, if it isn't just the members putting in bills, it's staff. By the end of session, we should be working on what's before us. not introducing new bills. We've even introduced bills on the last day of session when there has been no possibility of them going anywhere or being heard. So I would hope, members, and I'll ask for a roll call on this, we can at least say at some point, we're not going to put more into a finite system. We're going to say it is a limited system, and unless we get a 2/3 vote, we're not going to introduce any more bills.
A roll call having been requested, there will be a roll call, and I have to thank you, Representative Pulowski, for meeting with me. I know you've given rules a great deal of thought, and I appreciate your time in this. And I'm intrigued by this amendment, but I've spoken to a few members about this, not every member, of course, but I've spoken to a few members, and I'm going to ask members to vote against this today for a few simple reasons. As you said, it would require, if this were to go into effect, it would require 2/3 of the legislature to allow a bill to be introduced. And the problem I see with that is, well, first of all, we already could do this in Rules Committee, so we don't necessarily need to change the rules if we wanted to enact it, because we're already able to do that if we chose to do that. And I would just say the concern that I have, even though I'm intrigued by it, is that it would restrict members' ability and rights to be able to introduce bills. So I can see this being a problem if there's an emergency, and certainly 2/3 of members could, vote to bring forward a bill if there was an emergency. But I think that's a pretty high steeple or hurdle to overcome if it's something that's partisan or something that, is not agreed to by all members. So, and the other concern I have, this really could lead bills to be more general than specific in scope, because you'd have to be able to amend other amendments, and hope if you had ideas to introduce bills later on, it might kind of force you to make it more general and cause more amendments to come through with the bills that we have. So for those reasons, and the fact that we are here to carry out our legislative responsibilities, which could mean having to deal with an emergency in late May, the last day of session even, I would ask for a no vote today. Is there any other discussion? Representative O'Driscoll?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't really going to, comment on this, but maybe Representative Pulowski can help me with the final day in April for the bill deadline. Is that first or second year of the session, or the biennium?
Representative Pulowski?
Madam Chair, it says each annual session after the final day.
Representative O'Driscoll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Pulowski, so if I had a need for a bonding bill in my community, which the bonding committee usually does its work in the summer of the odd-numbered session, my community or my needs would not be able to be met if we ended up having some kind of an emergency situation or other coming forward. I would not be able to have work done on that. Is that how I'm reading this?
Representative Pulowski?
Madam Chair, Representative Driscoll, I don't think that situation would occur. I think what would happen would be, certainly there can be additions in committee, there can be amendments in committee. I've never had an incident where we have not addressed what I would call an emergency or a concern that needs to be addressed in the 30 years I've been here. So members have always used the fact that if somebody needs help, we're here to help them, and we should be able to raise the 2/3. The problem that I do see here, and it's a big one, is what's happened over the last few sessions. We have broken down, and we have broken down, I think, because we have put too much into a system that was never meant to have this amount of input. We are part-time. We pride ourselves on being part-time, and then we say we're going to do everything for everyone. At some point, there has to be a limit. I'm not in any way advocating we don't help those who need to be helped. And Madam Chair, you know that I've also worked on another couple of areas, Chapter 12A and 12B, which have outlined, and I've worked with Representative Albright on this also, to make sure we don't even need a special session, that we can do our work during the interim, and then we can address the need, which in this case would be the cost in 12A and 12B, when we come back into session. So this isn't in any way geared to say we're not going to do what we need to do, which is help people. I think government should be about helping people in need. But, Madam Chair, we just cannot have everything for everyone. I think there has to be a limit.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Peppin,
No.
Albright, Applebaum,
Yes.
Baker, Fenton, Flanagan, Freiberg,
Yes.
Gunther,
No.
Portman.
Aye.
Keel.
No.
Lesh.
No.
Murphy.
Yep.
Nash.
No.
O'Driscoll.
No.
O'Neill.
No.
Palowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
No.
Smith.
No.
Swedinski.
No.
There being 5 ayes and 12 nays, the A06 amendment does not prevail. Let's move to the A07 amendment. Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a pretty straightforward amendment. It just says that the House and its committees may not meet during a legislative day after midnight. This rule's been in place for committees as long as I've been here, certainly. I assume any rationale in favor of having committees do it would apply to the House in greater force. Many other states do this. Some, in fact, Representative Palowski informed me earlier, some, in fact, say it's the only rule of theirs that can't be suspended at any point. Representative Palowski also mentioned how we are part-time here, and too much is going into the system, and I think meeting after midnight just exacerbates that. It certainly is more difficult for the public to follow what's going on with us after midnight. Members who have young children, it's a problem for the members, and it just leads to, I think, a poorer quality of debate. I know there's also been instances where members have gotten into car accidents, presumably because of lack of sleep. So I would encourage members to support this. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you,
And
Representative.
I'd like a roll call on it.
A roll call having been requested, there will be a roll call. And Representative Freiberg, thank you for bringing this. And as you know, we do have the rule in our House rules already that we're not to meet past midnight, and it does get waived, and it has several times every year since I've been here, regardless of who's been in charge. And I certainly understand the concern. And I would just say that we have worked very hard to try to limit the time that we meet past midnight. I think we've gotten a lot better at that in recent years. But as you know, this rule would have an ability to kind of limit our flexibility and to be able to get our work done in time. So for that reason, even though I definitely appreciate what you've been saying, and Representative Portman and I have talked a lot about that, and I'm concerned as well about making sure that people get enough sleep and they're not out driving at crazy hours. We will do our very hardest to try to limit that from happening, but because of the need for flexibility, members, I would ask for a no vote today. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Peppin.
No.
Albright. Applebaum.
Yes.
Baker.
No.
Fenton. No. Flanagan. Freiberg.
Yes.
Gunther.
No.
Portman.
Aye.
Keel.
No.
Lesh.
I guess.
Murphy.
Yes.
Nash.
No.
O'Driscoll.
No.
O'Neill. Palowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
No.
Smith.
No.
Swedinski.
There being 6 ayes and 12 nays, the A07 amendment does not prevail. Let's go to the A02 amendment. Representative Applebaum.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'd like to move the A02 amendment, which I'd like to read verbatim since it's one sentence long for the dozens in attendance and the thousands watching around the world. The rule is no mute button or other device that when used acts to mute floor debate or silence members may be active on the House floor or used by the presiding officer. Madam Chair and members, I've been a member of this esteemed body for now 2 sessions, but I am unaware in the history of Minnesota statehood that anything like this has ever been employed by the speaker or presiding officer to silence the minority and cut off debate. And I'm not sure if it's driven by cowardice, insecurity, or incompetence in presiding over
Representative-
the House floor
Representative-
in a respectful manner.
Representative, I ask that you be respectful, and we're not to call names or question motives in committee or on the floor. Please proceed.
But it is disrespectful to not only the minority member who is speaking, but all of their constituents, the minority party, because that person and the position of that person's constituents and party is being cut off unfairly in a way that has never been done before. And last time I checked, Madam Chair, the majority party has the votes. So if it does not like the position that minority member is taking, whether it's a bill, an amendment to an amendment, the majority party can simply vote that provision down. And so I respectfully ask that the mute button be disassembled completely and nothing like it ever be installed again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ask for a roll call.
Oh, a roll call having been requested, there will be a roll call. And I would just say that, as you know, there are several rules in Masons and whatnot of how the speaker can control the floor, how the presiding officer can control the floor. And the rules are very clear that only one person can talk at a time. Obviously, they can be interrupted by a point of order or whatnot. But it is a tool for being able to control the flow of discussion, and people need to work, legislators need to work through the speaker anyway. So having said that, and with the understanding that the presiding officer does need to preside over 134 members of the legislature, and also with the consideration that many legislatures don't have hot mics, and as you know, all of our mics are hot, so we can all stand up and say something at the exact same time. So as a tool for the presiding officer, I completely understand what your thoughts are, and obviously I've been in the minority and the majority. I think it's flipped something like 5 times since I've been elected. But members, today I would ask for a no vote to the A02 amendment.
Madam Chair.
Representative Pawlowski.
Madam Chair, can I just ask a question? You might not be able to answer it, but for those of us who have been Speaker Pro Tem, and I was up there when it was the old panel, I don't recall any mute button under the old panel. I may have missed it, but I was up there for 4 years, and I don't recall it. The new panel, when I went up and looked at it, is dramatically different. Was the mute button part of a package? So you got a technology package, and they said you've got an array of things, or was it a deliberate addition? Do you know?
Representative Pawlowski, I don't know. I can look into it to find out, but I have no idea.
Would you?
It was actually news to me as well.
Madam Chair, this panel does a lot more than the panel I looked at. And it's a very interesting panel. I would encourage members to go up and take a look at what this thing can do. It's more fun. I can do that.
Thank you, Representative Pawlowski. Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope that the majority party will take this back to caucus and talk about it and consider bringing it forward as a bipartisan proposal when we take up the rules on the House floor, because I really think that it would contribute to the trust between both sides. I think the installation and use of the mute button has been really destructive to relationships between the minority and the majority party. There is a culture of the House of Representatives where every member is entitled to respect and every member is entitled to speak. And we might not always agree with each other, and as Representative Applebaum pointed out, you have the votes. But we have not had a culture of silencing the majority or the minority. I remember a very rough session in 2007 when we had some very, very vocal minority members in the Republican caucus that definitely gave Speaker Margaret Anderson Kelleher a run for her money. And it was her job to manage the floor, and she did so without a mute button. And we have seen since the founding of the House of Representatives that speakers or speaker pro tems manage the floor in a way where I think for the most part they try very hard to be respectful of all members, and they've been able to do it without the assistance of technology to cut off debate. And so I think it would be a great thing if we adopted this by working together when we take up the rules on the House floor.
Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, yeah. I think one of the frustrating things from the perspective of the minority is how we found out about this. We were all sitting on the floor, and Representative Thiessen was speaking, and this happened several times, and all of a sudden you couldn't hear him. And everyone looked at each other saying, what in the world is going on? Now, this body has been in existence for 150 years prior to the installation of that mute button. And there have been folks in minorities, there have been hot-headed members, and it's all been incumbent, as Representative Hortman stated, on the speaker, or the speaker pro tem, whoever it is, to manage the body. So I'd love to hear, you gave your explanation as to why this is a good idea, notwithstanding the way in which we all found out about it. And you also know, Madam Chair, that every time we switch from minority to majority, the minority yells about getting ramrodded by the rules, and the majority explains why it's such an awesome idea. And sometimes, you know, we flip back and forth. There's been some times that majorities have maybe overextended. Like I recall the previous question issue, you all lost your minds, okay? And I will state that I was against that at the time, okay? But, you know, all those things that you hated, now you love. Just like this mute button, and I would love to hear, in fact, if I could, Madam Chair, ask Mr. McCormick, how long has the PA system been in use on the House floor? Before you had to pick up a microphone when people would just say, I mean, is there anyone, would you know that, Mr. McCormick?
Mr. McCormick?
Madam Chair, the chief clerk's here and maybe is the best person to ask about that.
Okay. 1939, okay, thank you. 1939 is the answer.
Mr.
Okay.
Murphy?
So, I think Lynn Carlson was.
Representative Khan, too.
Yes. So, since 1939, is that almost 80 years or almost, I don't know, I can't do math. But we have not needed this. Speakers have been strong enough to manage the floor as leaders, and you grow in that skill as well, too. So I guess my question is to members of the GOP of this committee, why, after almost 80 years of speakers on both sides of the aisle having the skill set and ability to strength to manage all members of the body, do suddenly we now need it with this speaker? Okay, so I'm not going to get an answer. But just so you know, Madam Chair, that if the tables were turned on this, you all would be losing your minds right now. And when you go into the minority 2 years from now, I don't know, 2 years from now, whatever, you're going to be losing your minds about it too. So please keep that in mind. And Madam Chair, you were the only one who stood up to defend it today because you're the chair, and I get it, you have to do that, but this is bad, and I really hope it does not get used, and I sincerely hope that if there's some other technology you guys have up there, like an eject button or something else, that we don't find out about it in the way that we did that mute button.
I think there's that egg thing where the speaker can be, no, maybe not. Okay, any other discussion? Representative Freiberg.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that sorry. Couldn't really. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of trying to make a point too. It's you know, I was here. You know, when Speaker Thiessen was there, he managed some unruly members. I thought he did it with grace and dignity, and then we was here for 2015 in the minority. It seemed to work even then, and then all of a sudden at the end of the 2016 session. This starts happening. And I think if this were truly something that the majority were proud of or, thought were a legitimate tool to manage parliamentary debate, there would have been some discussion with the minority members, but instead it was just, all of a sudden it was just there was no announcement made. I think that's because, as Representative Lesch said, if this had happened and the tables were turned, we would have been hearing about it nonstop. So I don't think this is a valid tool of parliamentary procedure, and I think this amendment should be voted for.
Representative Gunther.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remember when the majority leader was Tony Sturridge, and one of my functions in the Rules Committee was to tell him how long we could debate every topic. Now, if that's not cutting off debate by the minority, I've never heard of it before. So there are ways that you were very creative in getting that done. I hope it's never done again. But there is ways that you have cut the debate from the minority very, very much. And a reason why is because sometimes the debate did last too long. But that's one of the things of our democracy. We get to fully debate and vet everything we do here. So this is nothing new. I don't think anybody pushed that button on purpose so far, but if it does, I wasn't aware of it.
Any other discussion?
Just
Representative Applebaum.
thank you, Madam Chair, and just find it ironic that Representative Gunther mentioned the word democratic, because the installation and use of this mute button could not be any more undemocratic. The spirit of the House encourages free debate, and again, your party has the votes. If you don't like what we're saying or what we're proposing, vote it down, but don't silence the mics intentionally, by the way, which is so unheard of and outrageous. It never came up in the 79 years, as far as I know, in the 79 years of the PA system, nothing like this was even contemplated because of how undemocratic it is. So I just thought I'd mention that. Thank you.
Go ahead. Representative Gunther?
I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between limiting debate by having time certain that we can debate any one topic. It's the same thing. It's not right in either case.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Peppin.
No.
Albright.
No.
Applebaum.
Yes.
Baker.
No.
Fenton. No. Flanagan. Freiberg.
Yes.
Gunther.
No.
Portman.
Aye.
Keel.
No.
Lesh.
Aye.
Murphy. Nash. O'Driscoll.
No.
O'Neill.
No.
Palowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
No.
Smith.
No.
Swedinsky.
No.
Seeing 6 ayes and 12 nays, the A02 amendment does not prevail. Representative Hortman, the A09.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, the A09 amendment brings back the concept of joint targets, but instead of putting it in the joint rules, it puts it in the House rules. And it would not become operational until joint targets were adopted in the Legislative Commission on Planning and Fiscal Policy, which has members of the House and the Senate on it. And again, it's just to prevent the train wrecks at the end of session. We can see them coming. And we can prevent them by putting into place a reasonable set of interim deadlines to get the work done. And so, members, I would encourage us to put this in the House rules and then work on persuading our Senate colleagues to work with us to adopt joint targets in the Legislative Commission on Planning and Fiscal Policy. Members, I would encourage your support, and I request a roll call.
A roll call having been requested, there will be a roll call. And Representative Portman, as I mentioned earlier, we are still in talks with the Senate about potential joint targets. So I would like to continue those talks. I don't think today is the day to put this in House rules, and frankly, it really needs to be, this isn't something that should be in rules anyway, and in permanent rules. It should be in a resolution if we're going to go this route. And I would like the ability to continue working with the Senate to see if we could put together some joint targets. And if that were to happen, then we would come forward with a resolution on the House floor. But I don't think it's a good idea to put this in the permanent rules of the House. We would have to amend it every year. I don't think that's the way to go. So members, well, I appreciate what Representative Portman had to say about joint targets. Today, I would request a no vote. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Peppin.
No.
Albright. Applebaum.
Yes.
Baker.
No.
Fenton. No. Flanagan. Freiberg.
Yes.
Gunther.
No.
Portman.
Yes.
Keel.
No.
Lesh.
Aye.
Murphy. Yes. Nash. O'Driscoll.
No.
O'Neill.
No.
Palowski.
Yes.
Keel.
No.
Smith.
No.
Swedinsky.
Seeing 6 ayes and 12 nays, the A09 amendment does not prevail. Are there any additional amendments? Seeing no additional amendments, I renew my motion to approve Rule 2017D. Is there any discussion to the rules? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
No.
The rules are approved or adopted. Members, we will be taking up the permanent rules during session this Thursday, February 16th, 2017. Please note that under a 24-hour pre-filing period for amendments to the permanent rules that is now in place. So amendments will be due by 12 on Wednesday, and amendments to amendments are due by 6 on Wednesday, February 15th. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, the committee is adjourned.